Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kastuba. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator in New York, at the Bhakti Center, New York. What?
The whole city.
He's the senior educator of New York City, Kastuba Das. Welcome. It would be pretty good if it was like that.
I would love that opportunity.
Okay, everybody, listen to whatever Kastuba says. You got that? If you're out of New York, New Jersey, you don't have to listen. But he's here live with me today. We're just sitting here next to each other, holding pinkies under the desk. You can't see it, but we do. He just pulled away. He pulled away when I said that. We got Kastuba. We kidnapped him. We brought him upstate, and he's on a little R&R. But we're going to try to coax him to give in a class for the teacher trainings. Oh, you are.
I think today I'm giving a class, as long as the time slot works for you. In any meetings that we might have today, but I think it's good in the afternoon.
We got to be careful with this mic because once you pull it away, people can't hear it, Kastuba. So that's why I'm going to hold it today, and you're just going to be at my mercy. Okay. So
why don't we go with announcements? And I got a nugget. You probably haven't even seen it yet.
I have.
Okay. Mara.
Okay, we have Bhakti Recovery Group meetings today at 12:30 and 1.
Oh.
It's okay.
Bhakti Recovery meeting.
Yep, and then Josh Kane is offering an asana class for our Patreon members at 10:30 a.m. this morning. And tomorrow's our Q&A day, so the show's at 8 a.m. And if you have questions, you can email us to wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com.
Okay.
The cult of Josh Kane on Patreon. There's a little cult going on.
Now, why do we have David Charles Wilson showing up? Can we unpin him? It's not your fault.
We have David Charles Wilson for some reason blown up on the Zoom board. That's okay. We like looking at him up there. Speaker mode. Oh, this is weird. He's pinned. Oh well, we like him. I don't think they see him. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into our nugget of the day, and then I got a secret nugget.
Do you have the nugget on your phone?
Yes, I do, my friend.
Who's this nugget from?
This is from your favorite and mine, Sir Isaac Newton.
Yes. Want to know a little bit about him?
Yeah, how did he get the name Sir?
I guess the Queen or the King gives you that title. But he obviously, people know him. He was an English mathematician, physicist, astronomer, alchemist, theologian, and author. And he's, of course, he's been given credit for a lot of important discoveries, especially around gravity and how the planets move and things like that.
Okay, so I'm working on my bio here. So I was a math major. Can I say that I was a mathematician? I'm a mathematician.
I don't believe you were a mathematician.
I was. And check this out. I'm a philosopher.
I'll give you that.
I'm a philosopher. I can put that in my bio.
Do you have a degree in philosophy? No, but you have a degree. I'll give you one for your studies in Bhakti philosophy.
Okay, thank you. And there was another thing that you wrote theologian, right?
Okay.
I'm a theologian.
Sorta.
Now, how do you get to be qualified as an alchemist? Don't alchemists turn base metal into gold? Isn't that like some type of mystic?
It's an ancient branch of natural philosophy, a philosophical and proto-scientific tradition that was historically practiced in China, India, and the Muslim world and Europe. I mean, all over the world.
That's pretty what Guam. It wasn't practicing Guam.
In its Western form, alchemy is first attested in a number of pseudepigraphical texts written in Greco-Roman. You always like that, Egypt. Okay, I'll give that one to you.
I'm an alchemist. I don't even know what it is. After that explanation.
And a natural philosopher, why not?
Okay, so here's the quote from Sir Isaac Newton. Gravity explains the motions of the planets, but it cannot explain who sets the planets in motion, right? There's always another why whenever you get to it.
Yeah, it's to me, he's saying something, in one sense, simple and maybe obvious, right? Okay, and he's a person that could be proud of his studies and discoveries in terms of gravity, but he's not claiming more than he's achieved. He's saying, okay, this can tell me a lot about how the planets move, but it can't tell me where they come from, how they were originally set in motion. It's telling me something about how they're in motion now. But what I've discovered through my studies is not sufficient to understand the big questions. And he's able to recognize that, admit that, live with that, deal with that, whereas I think currently in popular, I don't know if popular science would be the right term, but like this scientific quote unquote consensus.
Oh, that was a great phrase. The scientific consensus.
Yeah, well, I mean, that phrase is, I was just reading, I forget who was Creighton was writing about how the very idea of scientific consensus is, once you say consensus, it's not science, because science isn't determined by how many people vote for something. That's politics, right? Science, it only takes one person to go against the trend that's how actually great scientific discoveries are made, is that one person goes against the consensus.
Usually, as you're taught in school, you're like, this is science. This is the way it is. People still say this. We follow science. Yeah. People still say this. But when we got into Bhakti, we met all these scientists, because part of our studies as brand new devotees was taking courses by scientists. And they just really painted out how there can be many other worldviews. And there are. And a lot of them don't fit into the consensus of science, and therefore they just get cut out. Not that they're not valid or not that they're not true, but there is what you're supposed to believe to be science. And oftentimes that science gets overturned. Sometimes it takes a decade, sometimes it takes 100 years. But to say something's sort of held in stone, it's always changed. Isn't it interesting? We want some truth. We want some knowledge. We want something held in stone. But unfortunately, we're viewing the entire material creation with our limited senses. Therefore, there's going to be a limit to how much we can know.
That's where, again, the current scientific consensus oversteps, right? It's saying that we understand something that's beyond the realm of their study. It's beyond the realm of the what would the word be? Like what their method of study, right?
They don't have the particular instruments. Let's keep it simple. We're simple people here. The moth is born in a bag of cashews. It's such a good analogy. If you missed the show yesterday, I went to Trader Joe's once when I was, 20 years ago, and I found a moth inside a sealed bag of cashews. It was gross.
This moth thing is going to change the current scientific consensus.
I'd like to present it to the scientific body, but so my point here was, to this moth, this is the whole world. He has no clue. even which Trader Joe's it is. Is it the Santa Monica Trader Joe's or the Scranton, Pennsylvania Trader Joe's?
The moth will know something about what's going on inside the bag.
Sure.
But if it's honest, it will admit that it doesn't know what's going on outside the bag because it doesn't have the resources to determine that.
Sure. And therefore, how scientific can that moth be? That moth is like, we believe in science. There's nothing but cashews. Don't tell me all your far-fetched ideas.
It can be entirely scientific if it doesn't try to go beyond what it can actually discover, right?
There you go. And for the moth to come into real knowledge, it would have to say something like, you know what? I don't know if
it's outside the bag.
Yeah, I don't know if there is such thing as a Home Depot. There could be, but I don't know. You know why? Because I'm a little moth in a bag.
And that's what the current scientific consensus is generally unwilling to do.
And when I hear these things like, we believe in science, I feel like saying, oh, I'm so sorry. Because your science is limited. We're trying to find perfect knowledge with imperfect senses. That's a problem, moth person.
Okay, so this gets to what we discussed in some previous weeks about the kind of the simple but profound kind of epistemology that's used in Vedanta that says, okay, let's look at what are the sources of knowing. And we can divide that into three basic categories. One category we would call, it's really the realm of modern science, is empirical, what you can actually perceive through your senses.
And that's called what, Mara? Mara's on the hot seat. What's it called when you get information through your senses? What's the Sanskrit word for that? Come on, Mara.
I don't quite have it. Prayaksha?
Pratyaksha. We'll give it to her. Yeah.
Studio audience, yes. Okay.
And so, what you can perceive through your senses is one realm of knowing. It's not a perfect realm because the senses are not perfect, but it has its role. It's an important role. And then beyond that, there's certain things where our senses can stretch, and we can use inference. We can. Should we go? So anumana is the Sanskrit term for that, right? Pratyaksha means what's manifest, before your senses. Anumana means how your mind can follow and infer.
Right now, it's a little dark outside for this time. There's some inference that it might be raining, or it could rain, or yeah.
Okay, so that's also not a perfect way of knowing, but a valuable, useful form of gaining knowledge. And then the third way of gaining knowledge is through testimony, right? It's called shabda in Sanskrit, which literally means like sound. But there's certain things that lie beyond what the Vedantins are saying is that there's certain information that lies beyond what you can perceive through your senses, or you can even infer. And to know that, it can only come through testimony.
I'm going to blow your mind here with a Vedic squirrel. Check this out.
Are you sure you have to?
Yes. Shabda, sound. Shastra. Shabda. Shastra is like sacred literature. Shabda.
My mind is yet to be blown.
Shabda and astra.
Astra. Oh, it's sound weapon.
It's a weapon of sound that destroys avidya, ignorance.
Oh, that's an interesting way. I would also think that it's kind of like an explosion. Sometimes when you have that, what do you call it when you suddenly get your
mind is blown?
Your mind is blown, but what do we call that when suddenly it all makes sense to you, when everything clicks? What's
epiphany?
Epiphany. Kind of like an epiphany is like an explosion in the mind, right?
You like that? Shastra, Shabda, Astra. So Shabda Brahman, or transcendental sound, they say is the ultimate way. It's the ultimate science. Why? Because it's...
Well, let's say it's a form of knowing that goes beyond other forms, right? If you can hear if that moth, no matter how great a scientist that moth is, no matter how brilliant it is, no matter how good its moth eyes are working compared to other moths, it still won't know what's outside the bag unless it hears from someone that's been outside the bag.
Now here's so what Kustub is putting forth is there is Vedic information that's accepted as absolute truth, and it's beyond our senses. And there are simple things that we can do that we can, okay, it says you should regulate your senses. That makes sense. Okay, we should, sound has an effect on the consciousness. That makes sense. We got to be careful what we consume through our senses. It creates the mind. That makes sense. What are you doing with that microphone? Why are you taking that away?
Because you're loud. I'm just getting a little distance.
Are you sure I'm allowed? Are you sure?
I am. I'm right next to you. I can tell.
I might be loud to you, but I might not be loud to them. So Kostu is putting forth, there is this Vedic truth that is absolute truth. And some of you can understand, and some of it is very tangible. And it entices you as you get deeper realization to move forward in your understanding. Yet still, there are things you can't actually grip with your senses. They are left to reasonable faith. So my point, so now I'm going to challenge Kostubin, a gentle challenge. Wouldn't culture call this dogma? Dogma means, Mayor, pull up the definition of dogma, but
the dogma means like
you're accepting something for what has been told from generations before.
Kind of an insistence of like what's true, right? What do you got for dogma, Mayor? Something
held as an established opinion, especially a definite authoritative tenet, or a doctrine or body of doctrines concerning faith or morals formally stated and authoritatively proclaimed by a church.
Yes. So actually, it would be dogma. But the point is, you don't have to approach it dogmatically. In other words, yes, these texts are saying, here's the truth, right? In other words, if you came up to that moth and said, I can tell you what's going on in the rest of Trader Joe's, that would be dogma. That would fit the definition of what Mara just said. You know, it would be you're proclaiming what is true, right? It doesn't mean that it's wrong. And so, but the moth doesn't have to just blindly accept that. The moth can engage with that and test that and see how reliable you are as a source, where its senses or its inference do apply. And then it can begin to determine, do I want to accept what Raghunath is saying about the rest of Trader Joe's, or do I not? And so the reason I bring all this up, I appreciate what Isaac Newton's nugget, because he's saying, even though I'm the leading scientist of my time, I recognize the boundaries of my studies. And I recognize that when it comes to the big questions, like how did the planets originally get put in motion, all of my studies will fall short of that. I admit it, I accept it. If we're going to try to understand that, we're going to get into realms of philosophy, we're going to get into realms of theology, we're going to have to go into other realms, we're going to have to approach other sources. And so let's do that maturely, right? Now, what we're reading in Bhagavatam right now, and granted, we're kind of like, we mentioned yesterday, we're skipping over certain details, but it's describing all this really far out stuff. And one might not understand how to understand that there's an ocean of milk, that there's an ocean of ghee, and I was thinking, it's almost like here's the first important point, that this book, Srimad Bhagavatam, when we're reading it, it's almost like an assumption is being made. It's being spoken as a conclusion to a much wider body of literature, okay? And it's saying, if you've misunderstood anything coming along so far, what we want to do now is share with you what is the conclusion of all of this. And that conclusion, you could say, is a theological conclusion. It's what has all of this literature been aiming at? Ultimately, the individual soul understanding the nature of the relationship with the supreme source that's behind everything. That's what it's meant to illustrate. It's not meant to be a book to give in an argument or a presentation about cosmology that is incredibly well detailed and impenetrable, right? That's not its purpose. So, like, if we were speaking, for instance, if someone were hearing about, let's say, like like your truck, like your Ford truck or something like that, if you're speaking to someone that already knows all about automobiles, and so you could use terminology, you could say something like, well, it's got whatever horsepower. And then if someone from out of nowhere heard you speaking like that, they would say, oh, look at this ridiculous idea that this person thinks that this thing is actually powered by horses because they got some backwards ideas. They don't know anything about modern technology. And they're just here, they have some crazy backward idea that this thing is powered by horses. It's if you wanted to explain this to someone that knew nothing about automobiles, you would use different language. You wouldn't say horsepower, right? And so similarly, the Bhagavatam right here is, let's not worry about a lot of the language and a lot of what's being described. Let's try to understand what it's meant to convey. Let's focus on that first, primarily, what it's meant to convey. And what it is conveying here is we're moving through the universe, and we're hearing different prayers. Currently in this chapter, we're hearing prayers to the different devas. It's saying that there's a supreme source that's a person that's intelligent, that did design the universe, and that granted or delegated responsibility within that universe to different beings, empowering them with intelligence, empowering them with ability to carry out those responsibilities. And we're hearing prayers to them in relation to that original source. And that's what we're meant to gain. What is the attitude of these higher beings towards their source? What can I learn from it? That's really the primary message that we're getting from it. Now, scientists can approach it and say, well, what is it saying? They can look at the measurements that are given. They can try to see, does this fit in with modern discoveries? And when they do, they find very interesting stuff. That's not really our realm.
Right. It's like they catch up now. Like the scientists agree that these breathing protocol that the yogis do is very good for you. Thanks for validating that for us. We've been doing it for thousands of years. Another point I wanted to say is a lot of us out there are perhaps new to Bhagavat philosophy or Vedic philosophy. And so we say, you know what? Try it on. What's that? Like, there's these clothing companies that you can sign up for, and they send you a box of clothes, and you tell them what you like, and you can try it on and see if you like it. If you like it, try it on, wear it around, see if it works. It might not work. You might send it back. But try on the vid. If it sounds a little interesting to you, try it on. We're not even saying, hey, believe all this stuff. Yesterday, I prefaced my class because we talked about the Ramayana last night. Look, these stories are very fantastic sounding. Why not just extract some truth from it? You don't have to feel like, oh, I got to believe all this stuff. No, there's incredible. All these stories are peppered with deep, deep and relevant life lessons. Want to extract that. But the teachers of these great truths also say, no. It might sound fantastic, but it's way beyond our moth-like perception. But try it on, see if it works. And when I say try it on, don't just be sitting outside observing. Take some of the simple practices and apply them. That's how you actually try it on. That's how you taste honey. You don't just hold that honey jar and pass it around in your hands and squeeze the jar. You got to open up the lid, dip your little paw in, and lick your fingers. Huh?
Thank you for that.
Isn't that how you eat honey? Now let's get back to our our pinky holding. Come on,
animals do. All right, we ready to get into it?
Aren't we animals, Christina?
I guess in a way.
Are you gonna fist bump me? Was that?
No,
oh, okay. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayat. Before we started the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord Narayan. Unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayesh vabhadreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya bhagavati utama shloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. By regular attendance in classes in the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart will become eradicated, and loving service to the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, will be established as an irrevocable fact. Om Agyana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Meditam Yena Tasmaye Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my teachers are opening my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my obeisances at their lotus feet. Let me ask you a question, sir. Sometimes I get good questions after chanting those mantras. What's the verse? It'll be by regular attendance in class in the Bhagavatam. Yeah. When it's going to be established as an irrevocable fact, does that mean I'm going to understand everything of the material universe? If it's going to be established as an irrevocable fact, the Lord will be established in my heart as an irrevocable fact. What's the science there?
I don't understand what you mean. What's this?
My point is, how's it going to be a fact? It seems like facts equal science. Does that mean I'm going to know everything of the world?
It does mention that it'll be directly perceivable.
Okay.
Okay, so it'll enter a realm of knowing beyond just hearing. You'll experience it.
Okay.
We could go back to the second chapter. There's a verse. I really wish I knew that whole. It would really be a great thing to memorize that whole second chapter, the first canto.
Maybe you should do that too for this month. You should do that and learn the Prabhuji song. Memorize that too.
It's more important to me than the Prabhuji song, actually.
Well, Prabhuji song is a prayer to teachers. So unless you have appreciation for your teachers, Kastuba, all the purports of those things you want to understand in the second canto will not be manifest in your heart. I'm just trying to help you.
Yeah, but the Prabhuji song isn't. There's other songs that I might go to. Let's see what. Should I read these verses? Why don't I just read
the
some of
second
these?
canto?
That follow it. It's
Yeah.
second chapter, first canto.
Oh,
Where
they're the best.
it describes. I mean, you just want to really get into it.
Let's get it. I mean, you read these series of verses; they're powerful.
I had all kind of notes on this. I wish I would have them handy, but the question was asked to Sutta Goswami, what is it that brings complete satisfaction to the self? Atma Supersiddhiti.
Yeah.
What is it that brings the highest benefit for all mankind? The Sutta Goswami was recognized amongst all the sages in the forest as being having the deepest understanding of this. They mentioned why, because he was the gentle disciple of his gurus. He served them with such humility that he was especially blessed. He was an elder. He was very learned. They said, you understand all of Vyasadev's works, all of the Vedic literature better than any of us. You answer these questions, right? What brings the highest good to mankind? What gives complete satisfaction to the self? Is it the karma kanda, the doing pious works, following Vedic varnashram dharma, being very dharmic? Doesn't that bring good karma? Is that what it is? Is it renunciation, right? Knowledge of the nature that the self is transcendental and letting go of the things of this world? Is it jnana? Is that the highest thing? What is it? He answers, it's bhakti, actually. Right? He says, the supreme occupation or dharma for all humanity is that by which people can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated, right? It has to be pure. You don't want the results of good karma. You don't even want the results of jnana, like moksha. You just serve out of love.
Now, also within the Vedic context, this word dharma is thrown around everywhere. It is what the word everybody rallies behind. Be a good citizen, a good father, a good mother, a good son. Follow your duties in life, etc. So this word dharma, and there's dharma shastras. This is appropriate. This is inappropriate, and trying to follow these rules to be a good person who's going to progress in life. This sort of like flips this one upside down. The supreme dharma. There's actually the highest dharma, and that highest dharma is where you come to love of God.
Parama dharma is the term they use, the highest dharma.
Yeah, and what good is all these other dharmas? Oh my God! You want to hear my nugget? I got a Krishna nugget for you, sir.
Okay, all right.
None of your Isaac Newton nuggets. This is a Krishna nugget. Okay. Listen to this one. If the whole world glorifies me and Krishna does not notice me, who cares about that glorification? And if the whole world spits at me, thank you for that. But Krishna notices my service, who cares about that spitting?
Who cares? Is this your own composition?
I don't know where I got that. I just looked up quotes on my phone, and
who cares about that spitting?
Yeah,
very nice, Raghunath.
Thank you. Okay. I don't think it was mine. I think it was some anonymous saint.
Okay, so he comes out and he says that the highest dharma, what brings the highest good to mankind, and what brings Atma Supersiddhiti or complete satisfaction of the self, amongst all of the teachings, is actually bhakti. Now, then one might question, well, what about jnana? What about jnana and renunciation? What about knowing I'm not the body or I'm not the mind and renounce of the things of this world? He answers in the next text 7 of the second chapter of the first canto. He says, if you render devotional service unto Sri Krishna, you immediately acquire causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. The results of that If you just focus on bhakti, you get the results of jnana automatically. So certainly bhakti is a higher thing. You know,
I never put that two together.
I'm going to put a third one together for you. You see, so in between, someone could have asked the question, well, what about jnana, right? Well, now someone may say, well, what about karma?
I never put karma and jnana into that next verse. I love that next verse, but I never put it like that.
That's jnana.
Oh, my head is blown, sir. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to blow it again. That was speaking to jnana. If someone said, you're saying bhakti is the highest, well, what about jnana? He's saying jnana, all the results of jnana come without you even trying for them when you focus on bhakti. Then one said, well, what about karma? What about doing your duty in varnashram dharma and following that very religiously, very piously? Doesn't that give good karma? Isn't that the best thing for mankind? Doesn't that give the highest satisfaction to the self? And he says, no. Text 8, the occupational activities someone performs according to their own positions,
That's dharma.
that dharma, are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke an attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead.
All of our good work in this world is meant to bring us somewhere.
Right.
That's the main thing. So the good work has to be tied with our own liberation, our own connection to God. Otherwise, we're just living this world of good karma, and that ultimately means you're taking another birth.
Right. And let's not even confuse it by saying liberation, because there's different types of liberation. Let's say it has to lead towards that divine love, which is the ultimate goal. Right.
I like that.
Okay. Then he continues, all occupational engagements, all dharmas, are certainly meant for ultimate liberation, not just liberation in general, but the highest liberation, which is bhakti. They should never be performed. All of your dharma should never be performed for material gain, for good karma.
Isn't that interesting? They shouldn't be performed for material gain. It seems like our duties in this world, that's why we perform them, for some type of, I want a good family, I want to make some money, I want to.
In the Vedic context, the Vedas were, the original 4 Vedas were speaking that way, right? Do these sacrifices, follow these dharmas, and you'll get good results materially.
Sometimes people criticize religion. They say that's just them trying to control your behavior. And I was like, yeah, it sort of is. It sort of is. We have no control anymore, and the world's going to hell. You need a little order.
Okay. So now let us continue. He says that that all of our dharmas should never be done for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never utilize material gain to cultivate sense gratification. You're losing the point of life. You're missing the whole point. Mm-hmm. Well, then what should your life be dedicated towards? He answers in text 10. Life's desire should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life, right? Simplicity, right?
Healthy life.
Healthy life for self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry into the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works.
Wait a second. You're saying life's desire should never be directed towards sense gratification?
That's what he's saying. I'm not saying it. Sutta Goswami is saying it. He's been accepted by all of the different sadhus as like the most learned. Okay, so then one might say, okay, you just told me that life's not meant for satisfying my senses. It's meant for inquiring to the absolute truth. What is the absolute truth? How do we understand? There's so many different theories about the absolute truth. What can you tell me about the absolute truth?
Think about if one just took these 2 sentences seriously, how it could radically change your life immediately. Life's desire should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth.
Don't complicate.
That means we don't need anything.
Yeah, don't keep it simple. Don't complicate your life.
Mara, get all these plants out of the house. We want one chair in this room.
Well, the plants can help you understand.
Start throwing stuff out.
Yeah, the plants are helping, Prabhu.
Plants are helping. Okay, so then
these plants are so much useless, wasted time unless they provoke, what is it?
A desire to hear the message of Bhagavatam.
Yep, unless they, yes, Mara.
They do provoke that, Prabhu.
Okay, so then the question, okay, you just told me, Sutta Goswami, that the goal of all my works in life shouldn't be to enjoy this world. It should be to understand the absolute truth. Well, what can you tell us about that absolute truth? Is it a person? Is it just an energy?
Well, I tell you.
And then he says, in this such an important verse, text 11, learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth, he says, call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramama, and Bhagavan. It could be understood in 3 ways: as non-personal energy, as God within the heart of every living being and within every atom, and also as the person, sweet baby Krishna, Sri Krishna.
So this is also setting up like there is a gold standard of scientists in this world. They have to be learned transcendentalists. They're not just like studying some books. They're actually learning. They've imbibed this stuff. They practice this stuff, and they understand the otherworldly and the worldly. And this is what they say.
Okay. And so now you've told us that our life should be dedicated towards inquiring to the absolute truth. You told us the absolute truth can be understood as non-personal, spiritual, eternal energy. It can be, the absolute truth can be understood as God within the heart of every living being, and ultimately that the absolute truth can be understood as a divine person that we can have a relationship with. Well, if that's the case, well, how do I pursue that? Right? How do I pursue knowledge of the absolute truth? He says the seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment. They've got jnana, they got vairagya, but they want to go further. They realize that absolute truth. How? By bhakti, by rendering devotional service in terms of what they have heard from the Vedanta Shruti. They're taking instructions on how to do the practice from these ancient texts. Okay? So he says, O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection that one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation, according to the divisions of Varnashram Dharma, is to please the personality of Godhead, to please that absolute truth, that this is what all the duties are meant for. They're not meant for reaping good material results. They're meant for pleasing God. How, whether I'm a husband or a wife, I do it ultimately to please God. Whether I'm a business person or a teacher or a laborer, I do it to please God. That's always the purpose, because that's going to lead to my understanding the absolute truth.
Pretty amazing. You can sort of like drop the mic and just go home after these.
But there's still more.
verses. But there's more.
Yeah.
But wait, there's more. You just thought the goal of life was to please the personality of Godhead? Well, listen on.
It says, therefore, with one pointed attention, keeping the main thing, right? One should constantly hear about, glorify. So that's like hear about, like Shravanam, glorify, Kirtanam, Smaranam, remember,
Vishnu Smaranam.
right? And worship, and what would that be? Vandanam, I suppose, maybe.
Archana.
We can look. Archana. It says Bhagavan Satyampati Shrotavya. That's the hearing. Kirtitasvyascha,
Puja.
and glorifying.
Puja.
Pujas. Okay, dhyeya, remembering or meditating on, and pujas, and worshiping. Nice, huh? That this, so therefore, engage your senses, engage your mind, engage your body through glorifying, remembering, worshiping, hearing. That person who's the protector of his devotees. In other words, he's saying so much in this verse, how to engage oneself according to the path described in the ancient text. And when you focus on that divine person, you have a protector now. You're not like the yogi alone trying to conquer the mind and the lower nature by his own strength. But actually, through this process, you now have a protector. You have a divine protector, like backing you up.
So this is basically what we're trying to do every day with the podcast. We're giving a person and giving ourselves the opportunity to hear and chant and remember. This is what we try to do with our teacher training that's going on. This is what we try to do with our pilgrimages. This is everything that we're trying to do, is to promote this one-pointed hearing, chanting, and remembering the personality of Godhead, which will actually connect our duties in this world and have them become the supreme duty.
Now hearing was mentioned first, Shrotavya, right? And so it says in text 16, "O twice born sages, with sword," in text 15, "with sword in hand, intelligent people cut through the binding knots of reactionary work. They cut through their karma by remembering the personality of God. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message?" You got to hear. "O twice born sages." Well, how do I develop that affinity for hearing? Right? If that's the way out, if that's the powerful method, I don't always want to do that. I want to watch Netflix. I don't want to hear Bhagavatam. How do I get there? "O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done, and by such service, one gains an affinity for hearing the message of Vasudeva, of hearing about Vishnu."
Amazing little secret. How do you develop the attraction to chant? You're holding your beads. I can't chant. My mind's distracted. How do you develop that? You serve the devotees. If you have that mood of serving devotees, you develop attachment to Sri Krishna.
So then what happens if I develop that habit, that good habit, that taste for hearing Bhagavatam, hearing about Krishna, hearing these sacred texts? What does it do for me? How does it transform me? Text 17. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. It's not only what they lead to, like, oh, I heard that and I changed my life. Just hearing it on its own is very virtuous, right? So it's going to purify one of their lower nature. Okay, so then therefore what's the prescription? By regular attendance in classes on Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee. All that is troublesome to the heart, all the crazy programming in the mind, you could say, is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental song, is established as an irrevocable fact. You'll get locked in to the very purpose of life. You'll be operating according to the highest dharma. All right. So then what happens then? And this is, we're starting to get close to where this originated. As soon as irrevocable loving service is established in the heart, the effects of nature's modes of passion and ignorance, such as lust, desire, and hankering, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness and becomes completely happy. So that's where it starts. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling happy.
We're plagued with desires. This is like the foundation of Buddhism, right? So that our pain is from our desires. So where the desires come, they live in this Rajagun, this Tamasgun, these lower modes of passion and ignorance. And so by hearing the Bhagavatam on a regular basis, all of a sudden we become purified. Our consciousness becomes out of passion and ignorance, more towards sattva. And immediately the desires start to be mitigated. Immediately we start to feel like, you know what, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. I don't care what other people. A lot of times our desires have to do what other people will think of us. You want to hear a funny one about my mom? My mom used to always carry a bottle in her purse of water. She was the original person who carried water bottles around. And it was an Evian water bottle. And so she would say, you'd be peeling a banana? Get off me. It's peeling my fingers off the mic. So I was like, Mom, you always carry that Evian bottle. I was like, you're such a cheapskate. I've never seen you buy
like she would fill it up.
Bottled water. She goes, no, what I do is I keep it in the purse, but I fill it up at the sink. And so no one knows any difference. They think I'm buying the expensive stuff. And I was like, so when we give up the desire to try to impress people, so much of relief comes from us. So this is also part of the jiva rising out of that cloud of passion and ignorance, which tortures the living entity. How much things do we consume, or rather purchase for us, whether it's clothing or cars or real estate or zip codes where we want to live, just for other people? Sometimes we get into professions just to please other people. And the fact is, no, when we start becoming a little bit more spiritually minded, we get connected with what we need for our higher purpose, that starts to melt away. It becomes a relief. A burden gets taken off our back. And this is one of the symptoms that will happen when we start getting serious about hearing and chanting. As those lower modes of passion and ignorance start to melt away, you naturally become more peaceful, connected, grounded, and that tugging,
happy. Okay, so now let's go back to where we started. This conversation started by you're saying, okay, Shabda is one thing, hearing is one thing, but where does that lead? And I mentioned ultimately it leads to pratyaksha, that you directly experience something. So we went to this chapter, we went to the sages in Naimisharanya. They asked the fundamental question, what leads to the ultimate satisfaction, what leads to the highest good for all mankind? He says it's bhakti. He defends bhakti against counterclaims of jnana and karma. saying that the results of those come automatically, and the results of those have no value unless they lead to a hearing, to the desire to hear. Why? Because hearing becomes that process of purification. When you're putting that purifying spiritual information in, is kind of pushing the misinformation out, and your mind begins to understand the world through that knowledge. With that, you naturally, you're letting go. And now he's saying you have a protector, you have Krishna in your heart who's pleased by this endeavor and who is consciously purifying you of your lower nature. The result of it is that you're starting to feel happy. Okay. Now, this is the verse that I was really alluding to originally when you asked that question. Thus established in the mode of unalloyed goodness, right, in Sudasattva, the person whose mind has been enlivened by contact with devotional service to the Lord gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association.
So it's like there's scientific knowledge, but it's almost like your own private science.
Yeah,
Because it's like saying, I'm seeing Krishna face to face. You're like, well, I don't. Well, I know it's my own private science. You don't get it yet. You got to do more work.
And that, even that idea is kind of frowned upon in academic circles, but it doesn't mean that it's not true.
Right. Because science means just to know, but we accept that everyone will know the same thing, but it's just not true. There's people who just can't understand what you understand, and vice versa, because of perhaps personal experience or something from the past or something, how they're behaving. For example, if you live in the mode of passion and ignorance, you're not going to understand the direction people in Sattva Guna are doing. When I was young, there was a man that it was just like the perfect next door neighbor lawn. Everything was perfectly manicured. The lawn was so perfect, and it was so short, he would sweep it. That's how perfect his
Like
lawn
a
was.
putting green.
It was like a putting green. And I used to look at him like, who cares? You're wasting your time when you're lawn. Now that I'm older, and I'm like, that is a nice lawn. I appreciate a lawn like that. But I couldn't see it because I was sort of like a punky slob. So I'm just saying I couldn't see through his lens. So there is a knowing, but it's going to be different depending on what color lens you're looking at also.
Sometimes people say, I believe it's an entirely valid position to say that you cannot disprove the existence of God. You just can't, because it can be beyond the realm of your knowledge. So how are you going to disprove something that lies beyond the realm of your knowledge? You can say we have no proof. You could claim that we have no proof for God. You could make that claim. You could argue that. Someone could argue against that. That's another thing. But I don't think anyone can viably argue against the idea that you cannot disprove the existence of God. Any argument made would fall short. But sometimes you get people saying that nobody knows.
Yeah.
Right?
You can't say that.
You really can't say that.
Because you don't know everybody.
That's right. All you can say is that you don't know, right? And in someone's own experience, someone's own internal experience, we can't claim to know anything about that. So what it's saying here is that when it's saying, imagine this. Imagine that you had a mind that was free of the kind of cultural conditioning and programming that practically every living being's mind is programmed with. It's saying that if you could get there, and this is what the yogis do, that if you could get there, you would feel something, and through feeling it, know something that those that never did that practice and never achieved that goal would ever feel or know. That there's nothing wrong with that claim. There's nothing invalid about that claim. You it could be true or not, but it's fair, and it's a fair enough proposition, right? And so then the only way to really know about that is to do the practice, Sure. But even without that, we can use inference. We can say, well, I'm looking at the people that do that practice and make that claim, and I'm looking at the quality of their life.
There you go.
And that's a clue of what I might want to pursue, because I'm not going to be able to pursue everything in life.
Well, let's say, so there's people like the guy who free climbed whatever that mountain was. That, like, he's got some insight that I just can't have unless I start free climbing mountains. He's got some view of the world. Or there's Olympic swimmers, or there are these paragliders, or they have some type of vantage point and experience that they can speak absolutely about because they've had that realization.
So that's testimony.
That's their test, and I can't argue with that.
Right. And then you could take that testimony and line it up against 10 other testimonies, and then use your inference to see what makes sense. Well, this person has, based on the qualities of the people that are speaking, that's going to inform what you infer, and from that inference, you're going to decide what path you're going to pursue, what path you're going to place your faith in, and then you pursue it until you get some more direct experience.
Or well, sometimes we'll say that you got to be careful with trusting science, but sometimes we'll use this word science, a scientific fact. It'll become a scientific fact. Would you say a scientific fact would just be Shabda Brahman? Trust Shabda Brahman. Maybe that should be the little sign that I stick on my front lawn. Trust Shabda Brahman.
Well, again, when you call it Shabda Brahman, it's implying that it's spiritual and therefore it's truth.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't necessarily know which one am I going to trust. Am I going to trust the teachings of Bhagavad Gita? Am I going to trust the New Testament, the Old Testament? Mm-hmm. Am I going to trust the Aquarian Bible? We still have to
Seen Gospels of Truth.
The Seen Gospels of Peace, isn't it? Yeah, something like that.
The Tibetan Book of the Dead.
There's so many, and I might look at all of them, and I might say, "Oh, there's a common thread here too." So it's like we're not going back to Isaac Newton, right?
Yes.
We're not all PhDs in physics and so on. We don't all have that. Some of us have that, but even that doesn't grant you the power to know what's beyond your own realm of study. And even within your own realms of study, they're revising it. Basically, that's what scientists do: is they try to disprove the ones before them. That's how it progresses, commonly. So the point is, nobody here is saying be an entirely blind follower. What they're saying is get serious about life. Try to understand. Don't. If you're thinking that it's just meant for satisfying the senses, you're really missing out on the deeper purpose. Consider this. Consider what the deeper purpose could be. Apply yourself to different realms of Shabda. Size them up. See the qualities of the people that have placed their faith in them. Get clues from that, and then take your life and focus it. Try to aim for that highest goal. Don't be a blind follower either way. Don't be a blind follower of spiritual or so-called spiritual sectors, and also don't be a blind follower of secular sectors. Use your intelligence, and when you and I in our lives have found, when we apply to Gita, when we apply to Bhagavatam, when we see the qualities of not everybody that proclaims it, but those that we think really follow it, it increases our faith. And then when we get to chapters like the ones that we didn't read today, but we'll read when we come back again on Monday, we can approach it with a certain type of faith.
Yeah, we get to this point of could be.
Okay.
Oceanic. Yeah.
Why not?
Why not?
Okay. All right. So I think it's time
Imagine swimming in the ocean of ghee. Like, I
Well,
gotta take a bath in ghee to get this off.
Not if you had a body made of ghee.
Yes. Then be like, this is great. I feel refreshed in this ghee. Maybe.
Do you think you float in an ocean of ghee or no?
It's probably good for floating. Water skiing could be good. Maybe like scuba diving would be problematic.
All right. Mara, takeaways today.
Yeah, I got some takeaways. There's a limit to how much we know with our imperfect senses.
Yep.
Science isn't determined by consensus.
Nope.
No, that's politics.
Extract truth from what's relevant.
Squeeze it out.
Bhakti is our supreme dharma.
Supreme.
Okay, thank you.
This life is not meant for sense gratification.
Self-realization.
Hear, chant, and remember the Supreme Person.
Simple formula.
Focus on the divine person and you have a protector.
Yep.
You're protected by Shiva. So it's been said by the palm.
The palm reader told me that.
Serve the devotees to develop a taste for Krishna.
That's the secret.
Relieve yourself from the burden of trying to impress other people.
Like your mother.
Like my mom did.
Trust Shabda Brahman, but don't be a blind follower.
Okay. And
Try on the Vedic paradigm.
Try it on. Try it on, see if it fits. Thanks for everybody for joining us. There we go. Thanks for Stephanie Berman for being like in our little sitting behind us. There's a lady in the chair behind you. Oh, yeah. We got our crew here today.